Thank you for
Hello.
joining us. A couple days ago, we had about 30 registered for this call, and then just a few minutes we had 120 registered for this call. So thanks for joining us. It's an important topic, so really glad to see you here. We will give just another maybe minute or so to let people get in the call before we start with the presentation. This is our fourth webinar in our series since the new year, I guess since December. So it's really good to see you, those of you who've been able to join from multiple ones. But why don't we go ahead and get started? My name is Harrison Hanvey, and I'm the manager of outreach and partnerships for the Jesuit Conference of Canada and the U.S. I also serve as the co-chair of the Jesuit Migration Network here in that same region. We are grateful to each of you for being with us this evening and for all you're doing to accompany our vulnerable sisters and brothers who are navigating the immigration system here in the U.S. This is a collaboration between JRS USA, JRS Mexico, the University of Detroit Mercy Immigration Law Clinic, and the Office of Justice and Ecology in the Jesuit Conference. If you have not signed up for our Jesuit Migration Network listserv and would like to receive our emails, please let us know in the chat so that we can add you. There will just be announcements about upcoming webinars. People can send in questions. It's just a listserv we use to communicate. There's not too many emails that go back and forth. We now see that immigration norms and standards that we've become accustomed to regarding as normal can no longer be relied on in the way they once could. Immigration law is one of the most complex legal structures in this country, and if it was complicated before, it is even more so now. Things are changing by the minute. For our immigrant neighbors, things are more uncertain than ever. Will they have a work permit tomorrow? Should they send their kids to school? Is it safe to go to church? Should they go to their court hearing? What do they do if someone knocks at their door? And the most difficult question of all, is this still the right country to build a life in? With the recent passage of the Budget Reconciliation Bill this past week, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, funding for detentions and deportations will be at levels never before seen in the history of this country. And while those of us gathered on this call, most of us are not lawyers or legal experts. We are people of goodwill who have the desire to be with the vulnerable in these troubled times. But with the right tools and strategies, we can make a difference. We know this is true because throughout the history of this country, that has always been the case. And not only that, but in the history of our faith. It has always been the work of ordinary people, moved by love and conviction, who have bent the arc towards justice. And it is often the smallest acts of accompaniment that the greatest dignity is restored. So let us begin this gathering with prayer. I invite each of you to put yourselves in a comfortable posture and join me in these words from our late Pope Francis. We pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. God, Father Almighty, grant us the grace to work tirelessly for justice, solidarity, and peace, so that all your children may enjoy the freedom to choose whether to migrate or to stay. Grant us the courage to denounce all the horrors of our world and to combat every injustice that mars the beauty of your children and the harmony of our common home. Sustain us by the power of your Spirit, so that we can reflect your tender love to every migrant whom you place in our path, and to spread in our hearts and in every situation the culture of encounter and of care. Amen. We are fortunate to have great presenters today. Our first presenter will be Professor Alex Vernon, who has been the director of the Immigration Law Clinic at Detroit Mercy Law School since 2015. He's been there working with law students, assisting migrants. He is a founding member of the Canada-U.S. Cross-Border Network and is on the steering committee of the Canada-U.S. Border Rights Clinic, a new legal clinic serving migrants navigating the Canada-U.S. border. He will be joining the Southwest Immigrant and Refugee Center as their legal director just in this upcoming August. We'll then hear from Sarah Villegas, a lawyer who has worked with various organizations dedicated to the defense of human rights in Ciudad Juarez and Monterrey, Mexico. Since 2022, she has worked with the Jesuit Refugee Service of Mexico in their Ciudad Juarez office on the border with El Paso, Texas. In her work with JRS, she has accompanied people seeking refuge in Mexico, promoting access to legal rights, as well as attending and documenting cases of human rights violations related to migration. And if they're able to make it, our last presenters will be Jesuit priests from Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish in San Diego, who recently helped organize the diocesan-wide accompaniment of immigrants at their local immigration court, which gained national attention. This evening, they're actually meeting with their Bishop Pham about that exact action and how to continue to grow this ministry. So they'll be joining us just a little bit later. But Alex, you can get us started by sharing about accompaniment at immigration hearings and ICE check-ins, as well as touching on the legal framework and real-world considerations of voluntary returns or self-deportations. Sarah will then share about what things look like in Mexico for those who have been deported or returned, and what it means to balance accompaniment with autonomy and self-determination. Alex, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Harrison, and thank you all of you for joining. I admit that I sort of spent the day or the last few days kind of doom scrolling in preparation for this presentation, just kind of summarizing even some of the most recent changes in immigration law and how they're going to impact the people that we want to accompany. So I decided to put on my floral shirt, cheer myself up, and since I've got an audience, I'm going to start with a bit of a song that I learned when I was a bus driver at a Lubavitch day camp in Toronto. Don't walk in front of me, I may not follow. Don't walk behind me, I may not lead. Just walk beside me and be my friend, and together we will walk in the way of Hashem. I did some research on that song, and it's been attributed to Alfred Camus, and some people say no, it wasn't him. But anyway, to me, that song, encapsulates the concept of accompaniment. It involves walking beside people, empowering them with knowledge to be able to exercise agency in their decisions impacting themselves and their families. And some of these decisions may involve whether or not to engage or to continue engage with the formal legal process. And I think accompaniment ultimately means respecting that autonomy. However, here we are talking about how we as American citizens, as permanent residents, as friends of these individuals can provide accompaniment. And I'll ask if Clara can bump me a couple slides forward. So the first slide, I'm trying to keep track of all the screens that I have up here, is where you can reach me. And feel free to memorize that phone number, 313-444-9222, or my email. I'm happy to take calls from people that are assisting migrants or from migrants themselves. That's a bit of a hotline that I pass out. And the next slide is where I'll be found in August at the Southwest Detroit Immigrant and Refugee Center. The first issue that Harrison had asked me to talk about was courtroom accompaniment. And the picture I decided I wanted to share with you is, of course, that picture of Bishop-elect Pham and his courageous presence at the courthouse and the impact that that had. Those of you who read the story know that there were ICE officers waiting in the hallway, waiting to detain individuals, and they ended up leaving at that particular moment. And there was an exchange between an ICE attorney and the bishop, in the restroom of all places. And the ICE attorney expressed his misgivings at having to execute some of the policies that we're going to talk about. If you can bump that slide, next slide, please. So the first question is observing immigration court hearings, and I understand that there's going to be a little more information about a formal project, but yes, immigration court hearings are generally open to the public with limited exceptions, and you don't need to contact the court ahead of time, although it is advisable to, at least if you know the individuals that may be appearing in court, contact them or their attorneys. And just as a courtesy, give them a heads up and ask them whether it'd be helpful for you to come. You can do the next slide, please. Again, the immigration court hearings are generally speaking open to the public, and the next slide will show some of the exceptions. If a person has a protective order, if there's an abused spouse or child, you may require the consent of the respondent. If there's a person who has a Violence Against Women Act type victim claim, if there is an asylum claim, you would need the permission of the respondent to attend, but otherwise, the hearings can be open. Okay, if you can bump up to the next slide. And again, this talks about the fact that you do not need to notify the court in advance. However, you're encouraged to contact EOIR's Communications and Legislative Affairs Division to coordinate the visit. Okay. Interestingly enough, the next slide is where I advise you to consider contacting attorneys. But the next one points out the fact that immigration court hearings are both in person and also internet-based. The training provided by the American Bar Association in their immigration court observer process describes how it's possible to attend virtual hearings. It's, I think, a little bit more of setup needs to be done. It would be advisable if you're attending a virtual hearing to, have the consent and the knowledge of the respondent that you intend to support and their attorney, and follow the instructions the attorney gives. So in most cases, when you log into the WebEx system at the chosen immigration judge's address, here's an example from the Eloy Immigration Court that handles detained cases in Arizona. You would log in with your name and you would put observer, and you would put the last 3 digits of the alien number of the person you intend to observe. And in that case, the judge would consider letting you in, first talking to the attorney or to the respondent, as they're called. Okay. And again, there are formal programs set up. The American Bar Association does have a program you can Google, and I'll also be sending out the slides, where they're taking volunteers, legal and non-legal, to be formal court observers who will actually take notes on what they observe. You can do the next slide and it gives some more details on that. Whoops. Okay, next slide after that. I forgot to take that slide out. Okay. So you can and should consider participating in immigration court observations. The next thing I was asked to talk about is the barriers and risks migrants face in immigration court. And basically, this is where we talk about some of the dire changes to immigration law that have happened recently. So basically, we have the expansion of something called expedited removal, and also the expansion of immigration detention. So currently, ICE is interpreting its power to utilize expedited removal to basically people that have been identified, this is what the slide here says, as being paroled at the border, and either the initial CBP encounter was within 14 days or 100 miles of the border, or the non-citizen has not been continuously physically present in the United States for 2 years prior to the finding of inadmissibility. So in the past, we would consider that people who don't have those 2 years of physical presence in the United States might be subject to or vulnerable to expedited removal. However, ICE has gone a step further, and basically they say that in their reading of the law, and this is what they're enacting so far without any restraint from the courts, that there is no time limit on the ability to process arriving aliens or arriving non-citizens for expedited removal. So you could have people that presented at the port of entry seeking asylum, didn't have otherwise appropriate documents for entry into the United States, and they're considered to be arriving aliens or arriving non-citizens. And it could be more than 2 years ago that they came to the United States in this way. And according to ICE, these folks are still subject to expedited removal. What does that mean? It means that if these individuals have a court case, they may show up to court, and they may find that the ICE attorneys have moved to terminate their court case. And this might seem like a good thing. Oh, they're going to take me out of my court proceedings where I'm asking for asylum, and I'll no longer be in removal proceedings. But the bad news is that, as in the case where Bishop-elect Pham showed up at the court, when ICE is moving to terminate these cases, the other enforcement branch of ICE is usually waiting to place people in expedited removal proceedings. And as of last week, the Supreme Court has ruled that they haven't ruled on the case itself, but they've ruled on the injunction that the government is not required to actively screen people for a fear of removal to a third country before doing expedited removal. Sorry, I'm garbling up two concepts there, and that's third country removals and expedited removals. But suffice to say that people are being scooped up at their immigration court hearings after their proceedings are terminated. They're placed in expedited removal, and unless they successfully convince an officer to give them a fear screening with the asylum office, where they have a chance to convince an asylum officer that they have a reasonable fear of persecution, they can be sent back to their country. And as we're learning, they can be sent to third countries as well. All right. The other, if you get back up just one bit, the other piece to the expansion of expedited removal is the expansion of detention. And as of a recent Board of Immigration Appeals decision, basically anybody who entered without inspection to the United States is included in a list of people that are no longer considered eligible for a bond before an immigration judge. So even if somebody entered without inspection, they've been here 20 years in the country, have numerous equities, U.S. citizen, spouse, and children, they're not able to access a bond hearing before an immigration judge. Instead, they are required to ask ICE, enforcement and removal operations, for permission to be paroled from custody. And guess what? As of the incoming administration, those releases from custody have been few and far between. I probably in the order of, well, I don't want to speculate on the numbers, but I have not had anybody released since the Trump 2 administration took power. So these are the risks. People who show up to court may be placed in expedited removal and be at risk of removal on very short order. And even if not placed in expedited removal, they're certainly vulnerable to being placed in detention and not have access to a bond process before the immigration judge. Okay, next slide. I was asked to comment on the process of, well, actually, before I do that, let me talk about accompanying people to ICE reports or to other immigration appointments. Again, to give you an example of when that was done recently, we had a young woman in Detroit who had a report date with enforcement and removal operations. She had a pressing humanitarian concern. She had a U.S. citizen child who needed urgent surgery, and we had an accompaniment team, including myself as a lawyer and some other community folks that showed up with her at her appointment, and were able to meet with the ICE officers conducting her removals case, and able to sort of have a dialogue with them and explain to them that indeed, she was aware that she had a removal order. She intended to depart. However, she needed a time to accomplish this surgery for her daughter. And the ICE officers discussed with us the need for her to bring the passport of her U.S. citizen child and to update them on the progress of the medical situation. And that's in fact what happened. She left without being detained. And she's gone for a subsequent report with ICE without any problems. And that's the power of what accompaniment can accomplish. So you can accompany people to ICE reports. Before you do so, though, I would strongly advise, and I'm sorry I'm sort of disjointed in the order of my presentation, for all of these cases, make sure that the person has had the opportunity to have their case screened by a reputable attorney. And I have some slides as to where you can find good attorneys to make sure that all the legal options are that there's no legal options left unturned. And again, with any of these situations, there is a strong risk of detention, and people should be advised and advised to make preparations accordingly, which can include some family preparedness preparations, which I have some slides about shortly. Okay, Let's see what I have on the next slide there. If you can go ahead, Clara, please. Okay, so ICE took CBP1, the application used for people to make appointments for asylum claims, and turned it into CBP Home. And the main purpose of which is for assistance to voluntarily self-deport. Next slide, please. And so it's been touted as Customs and Border Protection announces the public-facing mobile application CBP Home. It has the intent to depart function, which offers unlawfully present aliens or those aliens whose parole has been revoked an orderly and defined voluntary process to notify the U.S. government of their intent to depart the United States. Okay. There's also, and this next slide is what's being given to people at immigration court even before their process is over. So these advisals or warnings or urgings to consider self-deportation. I understand that in the physical courtrooms, these materials have replaced materials that were previously there on legal orientation as to their rights in immigration proceedings. So you can see where this is headed. There's also a talk of monetary assistance for people to return. And interestingly enough, it says, future opportunity for legal immigration. All right. So in reaching out to colleagues, I've tried to find out, well, does anybody have any anecdotal stories of people successfully using this to go home and getting the $1,000? And I haven't heard of anybody successfully using it to get the $1,000 back. It's perhaps too early in the process, but the general consensus that was shared with myself and other attorneys is, if somebody is really intent on returning home, rather than relying on the CBP home process, I think it would be more advantageous for the person to leave of their own accord and then use the available consular reporting process to document the fact that they've left. So in other words, leave on their own steam, and then once they're safely where they intend to be, notify the US government via consular report. That way it avoids the possibility of committing your information to CBP home and then having cold feet, or having something else come up, or having CBP decide that in the process of you submitting your information, which I understand involves taking a selfie, including your geographic location, there's a possibility they could decide that, well, we actually don't want you to participate in this program. We'll come and get you ourselves. Thank you very much, and detain you. So, I mean, if you have somebody that's in financial straits and needs the help to self-depart, I think it'd be far better for the community to organize resources to help them self-depart rather than relying on CBP home. But perhaps with more experience with the process, people have different takes on it, and I'd be happy to hear if anybody here has had any experiences with it. All right, next slide, please. Oh, and again, departing under CBP home does not, in and of itself, give anybody any pathway to coming back or pathway to citizenship, or give you any rights that or advantages other than perhaps avoiding getting caught and being detained, avoiding monetary fines. This is another piece that the administration has come out with, is sending notices regarding monetary fines to people for unlawful presence in the United States. I have a slide about that in a moment as well, but oh, here it is. If people who have unlawful presence from entering illegally and have more than 1 year of unlawful presence, for example, if they depart, they're going to trigger an unlawful presence bar on returning for 10 years, regardless of whether they depart with a removal order or CBP home or otherwise. So we want to make sure that people don't think that there's some magic wand that attaches to leaving with CBP home that'll give them benefits that they didn't otherwise have. Okay, so the previous slide talked about the fines that the government is sending out, fine letters, levying fines on people for entering illegally, overstaying orders of removal, voluntary departure orders. And people are reporting getting these letters on behalf of their clients, some of them with like $1.5 million fines or notice of intent to fine. And we're still sorting out, the process of requesting a hearing on the fines, et cetera, et cetera. it's a real pickle. But these are some of the incentives the government is using to try and coerce people to leave. All right, let's see what I have for the next slide. Okay, again, almost everybody who's not a U.S. citizen, permanent residents included, if they are considered to, we've seen the examples in the media, right? The permanent resident who was protesting the Gaza genocide, being arrested and detained. Almost anybody who is not a U.S. citizen is at risk of detention and should be prepared accordingly. And so there's various ICE raid or ICE detention toolkits that are out there. If you can bump over to the next slide, that talk about important concepts such as organizing your personal documents. Go ahead to next slide, please. Getting screened, as I said, by a lawyer. Next slide. Planning for medical needs. Next slide. Planning for childcare needs. Not wanting to have child protective services having to come and pick up your child because you haven't made provisions for being detained. And next slide, go ahead. That could include preparing a power of attorney for the children's care. Next slide, guardianship. Okay. And I'm near the end of my time, so we'll bump ahead to the next slide there. Next one. Perfect. Okay. The American Immigration Lawyers Association is an association of immigration lawyers. Not all immigration lawyers belong to this association, and belonging to the association doesn't mean that they're a good or ethical lawyer, but it means that they have access to trainings and resources specifically regarding immigration. And it's a good start to have a look at lawyers on this list. Now, if you find an immigration lawyer that is not a member, it might be because they work for a nonprofit and they can't afford the membership fee, and they might still be a very reliable and good immigration lawyer. Also, you'll find a list of pro bono legal service providers on the website of every immigration court. So this is a place that you can find assistance. Also, you can dial 211 or go to 211.com. So hopefully I've covered the points that I was asked to cover, and I'll be around for questions afterwards. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Alex. That was wonderful. That was a wealth of information. We had several questions in the chat and a few things as well, but we are going to go ahead and have Sarah present, and then we'll get to all the questions at the end. So Sarah, take it away.
Thank you, Harrison, and thank you everyone that is here, that joined, and just give me 1 second. And well, now I'm going to talk about how is accompanying voluntary returns here in Mexico. I am here in the office of Ciudad Juárez, and there's like a brief part of the context and where are we. In case that you don't may know, we are in the border of Juarez and El Paso, Texas. And what we were seeing in the past years is many and thousands of people that cross the border with the CBP-1 when it was allowed, and carrying along not only their belongings but also their dreams and their wishes. And what happened this year? At the end of the CBP-1 program, a lot of people were stranded in both sides of the border. I mean, I know that it may be in other parts of Mexico and also from the United States, but that's what we are seeing here. And people is scared of being deported. Those who arrived the United States with the CBP-1 appointment started to talk to us and share that they were scared. Separated families, some of them were able to cross the border, but others stayed in Mexico. And why was this happening? It was because maybe one part of the family came and made their appointment for the CBP-1, and then the other part of the family came before, and then it was in January. The program was canceled. Mm, Obviously, psychological affectations for everything that is happening and deportation. So we have some stories and testimonies of people that we have been accompanying, and in this side we are identifying two different like scenarios, and one of them is or what we were expecting is that a lot of people deported, but I don't know why. I don't know what is happening, but we are not seeing the numbers and the amount of people that we thought that will be arriving the border. But what we started to see is a lot of people that wanted to return for different reasons. And I could point three in here in the presentation. One of them is because they started to feel unsafe or afraid of the new policies. The other one is because they wanted to be with their families. This because maybe there was like some of their mothers or some family that was sick, so they wanted to come, and this together with the new policies started like this desire to return. And another is that one of the members of the family was deported. Uh, for example, in a family of mother, father, and kids, maybe the father was deported, and then the family stayed in the USA, but obviously the family wanted to be together, and they didn't have the possibilities. So I have two different cases. One of them is one of a young male. He was beaten in his way to the United States, and he got side effects, both physical and psychological. And with the new policies, he got scared of being deported and then decided to return with his family. What happened with him? The thing was that he didn't have any identity document, so we have to give him the accompaniment here in Juarez, so he can return. And how this works? In this particular case, there were different benefactors in the USA that helped him to come or to come to El Paso. They also came with him to Juarez, and then we received him here in Juarez, took him to a shelter, and then make all the legal the things that were legally necessary so he can return to his country. I can talk a little at the end of what we need, what are the necessary documents, but now I can continue with this. Unfortunately, he didn't have his identity documents, as I told, and he go to Tapachula. And Tapachula is in the south of Mexico, and then he continued by land. In every moment, we have communication with him until he gets to his destiny. Then we have the case of a young father with his child, and the mother of the child died when they were on their way to the United States. Sorry, and then he arrived here to Juarez. I mean, he returned from the United States to Juarez with the help with some networks of the church at El Paso, and then we received the family in one of the bridges of the international bridges, and then we took him to a shelter and offered all of services. And also with him, in I think it's something that maybe in most of the cases he didn't have identity documents or at least necessary documents to travel by air. So he have to go by air from Juarez to Tapachula and then continue his journey by land. And also in this case, we had communication with the family until they arrived to their destiny. This is just 2 cases, but we have a few more. And also, if there's more, we are continuing to receive them. Something important that I wanted to share is why are we giving this accompaniment? I mean, everyone can come to the border and can continue their journey by themselves. They don't need an organization. But what is happening here in Mexico, or at least in Juarez? The thing is that most of the people already had some security incident in Mexico or in other parts when they were coming to the USA. Most of them kidnapped or human rights violation, arbitrary detention by the immigration authorities here in Mexico. And that's why we have to try to go with them, receive them at the border or at the international bridges, and try to keep them safe. And we, as I am pointing here, we are trying to embrace and make the people feel safe here in the border. Which are the risks and the challenges? As I said, well, the security risks continue, are still present here in Mexico and also in the border. And the border is an unsecure area, super unsecure. And the transit, sorry, the transit of migrant people has become an income for the human traffickers. So it's best if they are accompanied by some organization. Not having identity documents could difficult the obtention of an exit document. And if you are not accompanied by some organization, it may be even harder. And the voluntary return, in the past cases that I mentioned, and in some others, the persons that we are giving the accompaniment want to do it as fast as it can be, because of they scared or whatever. And this makes that the tickets are like expensive, because do the speed which is required, I'm sorry, are high due to the speed which it's required. I mean, you have to buy them from one day to another. And well, balancing accompaniment with autonomy and dignity. As I'm pointing here, it's very difficult to accompany these cases because most of the people is confused and may take quick decisions that can affect them. And what are we doing here in the office in Juarez? We are trying to give an integral attention, not only legal, but also psychosocial and humanitarian aid. If someone has some specific needs, we can try to get them and try to address the immediate needs. For example, for clothing, or for I don't know if there's like a medical need or something. And also help them to clarify and show all the legal options, and not only legal, but also what they can do. Maybe if they can stay a little bit more here in Juarez while they can decide what to do, or something like that. And other thing that we are making is look up for shelters based on their needs. For example, I wanted to point this example, a woman that comes with his kid, her kid, I'm sorry, and they have suffered violence, whether here in the United States, Mexico, whatever, we can to try to find a safe place. And this is a little flyer that we wanted to prepare and share with you, and to explain a little bit what is an exit permit. This is a migratory document submitted by the National Institute of Migration here in Mexico for non-Mexican persons that want to return to their countries. We can share this with you at the end. Sorry. And what do we need? First of it, and some ID with a photo. That's main. If there's a passport, it's super good. But also the tickets, and where we can get it in here in the office of the National Institute of Migration. And also the other points that we can consider are there. Some of them are you don't need to be accompanied by some NGO. For international trips, you may have a valid passport. This permit gives you from 15 to 20 days to leave Mexico. And I think that that's it. And also, as you may know, if someone wants an assisted voluntary return, they can contact the I'm sorry, the OEM. I'm sorry, OEMA. It's called here in Mexico. But well, that will be it for now. And thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. That was wonderful. We've gotten a good number of questions in the chat. We got probably about 10 minutes. Maybe we could stretch into 12 minutes for Q&A. Most of them are about courtroom accompaniment or ICE accompaniment. If you have more questions, feel free to put them in the chat them to me, however you want to do it. And I will monitor the Q&A, and I'll facilitate the Q&A with Alex and Sarah, or if anyone others, or if there are any other questions as well. Okay, first question. Alex, this one's for you. Can you walk through what it's like? The immigrant goes to their court case, the case is withdrawn, you accompany them, are they immediately detained? Does it matter if they have an asylum case that's pending? Just kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, so first of all, we shouldn't just sort of sit back and take that as for granted. If the person has a lawyer, the lawyer has the possibility to object to the termination of the case, to ask the government, what has changed in the case that leads them to the conclusion that, prosecution of this case is no longer warranted, or at the very least to ask the judge for an opportunity to brief, to write arguments opposing the termination of the case. And the lawyer should do that. If there's no lawyer, the individual should be prepped to do that. If the case is terminated, it's quite possible that ICE officers would be waiting in the hallway. I think my understanding is that there's sort of an omnipresence at the courts nowadays, and could put them in detention and place them in expedited removal. And again, with expedited removal, they can be whisked away to their home country. And now we're finding they can also be whisked to third countries unless they successfully shout their fear. And there's no guarantee that Homeland Security is going to ask them if they have a fear of returning to their country or to this third country. They have to manifest their fear, shout their fear, exclaim, loudly and clearly that they have a fear of returning, and demand to have an interview with an asylum officer. Then that's, so you're asking, well, does that matter if they have an asylum claim pending? Yes. So when they terminate proceedings, that asylum claim is effectively terminated as well. We're also seeing situations where people that have affirmative asylum claims that they filed with the asylum office, we've seen cases where the asylum office has sent them a notice that they're closing the case, and that the person, because the person is subject to expedited removal, and that in some cases they're directed to turn themselves into ICE and request a credible fear screening there, which, of course, may lead to detention. So yes, if somebody finds themselves in a situation where their proceedings are being terminated, they should consult in most cases in these situations, that's going to be a bad thing because it may lead to expedited removal. But they should consult with a lawyer beforehand. Because of course, in some cases, and in the past, termination was generally seen as a good thing. Now it's sort of seen as a trap. Hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Alex. What are things to consider, kind of expanding one of the questions here, specifically for asylum seekers if they have upcoming hearings and they're concerned about, is there a chance for me to get arrested at this hearing? Should I go? Should I not go? What are things to consider there?
Again, as an officer of the court, I can't counsel people. Well, I'm not counseling any individual here. I'm talking to accompaniers. I can't counsel individuals not to appear in court, but I can talk to them about the risks that they may face. I think in every case now, people do have to consider the possibility of detention and consider whether they have the resources to sustain themselves and their family during detention, whether they can endure the family separation, and whether they think they have a good case that they could prevail on while detained, because they may have to prosecute their case while detained. And if the answer to those questions is no, 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 realistically, people need to be made aware of that and need to consider their alternatives. But as attorneys, we're sort of in a position where we can't be encouraging people to abscond from proceedings. But I think it's fair enough to alert them to the risks of detention and have them evaluate ways to mitigate that risk or to overcome it.
Thank you. And what about, we've heard reports that people are able to change their in-person hearings to a Zoom hearing because of fear about being detained. Is that a possibility? And if so, how do you do that?
Yeah, so that's an interesting strategy that lawyers have been talking about. Whether it be filing a motion for a WebEx hearing and just citing, the distance to the hearing, the expense, et cetera, or some attorneys have been openly citing the risk of detention in the motion, which is sort of risky because if you have an immigration judge that's sympathetic, the immigration judge might consider that favorably in the request. But if you have an immigration judge that's sort of not sympathetic, they may say, well, why the heck would I be considering your risk of detention in my motion? And what I've been hearing for the most part is that these motions have been denied and the courts have been requiring the respondent's presence by WebEx. And lawyers have been having serious discussions as to whether they're going to advise their clients to appear via WebEx anyway and risk a removal order, which could be litigated and appealed and later on, rather than risking detention. So again, I think these discussions need to be had, hopefully with the help of counsel on an individual and case-by-case basis to assess a particular individual or family unit's risk for detention.
Thank you. What about for accompaniers? What are things to consider when accompany a person to a court hearing or an ICE check-in? Is there anything that could potentially make the situation worse? Is it always helpful?
Right. So again, regarding court accompaniment, generally you certainly have the right to, unless you have some sort of criminal issue, that might prevent you from attending a court building. You have the right to be in the court building. Whether or not you have the right to enter the proceedings will depend on whether or not the proceedings have been closed by the judge for whatever reason. And they note in their communique on the EOIR, that's the Immigration Court website, that sometimes the judge may close proceedings to further observers because of space limitations, or there may be media interest in the case and media gets priority. But otherwise, you should be allowed to certainly be at the court, be in the waiting room, or even attend in the hearing. No recording device is permitted. You can't, heckle or participate in the hearing in any way. And certainly no obstructive behavior. Don't be blocking bailiffs or officers of the court or trying to engage with opposing counsel. remember, there are officers and security guards there that have guns. And by the way, no weapons allowed in the court, which goes without saying. But just keep in mind that you have law enforcement officers that may be on edge, and you don't want to take any actions that might endanger yourself or others. For the ICE accompaniments, same thing. Generally speaking, unless somebody has some sort of order preventing them from being at the building, they could accompany somebody to an ICE check-in and at least get as far as the waiting room. No, I think only an attorney would have the right, or only the immigrant would have the right to bring an attorney into the actual interview room. The observers, the accompaniers, that's subject to the ICE officer's discretion. But generally, I've seen them being allowed in. And obviously, if you're there and agitating or obstructing or making a commotion, you'd likely be escorted out. So just common sense in that regard. But I think a quiet and prayerful, if and this is a Jesuit call, so I imagine there are a lot of people that would intend to be there with a prayerful presence, is certainly appropriate and very impactful.
Moving on to CBP home or voluntary returns, is there a risk of detention by TSA at airports for individuals who are trying to return to their home country?
I would say there's nothing preventing TSA from flagging or alerting Customs and Border Protection or enforcement, immigration enforcement and removals to somebody that's of interest. And so, I'd say there is a risk. It wouldn't necessarily be the TSA officials detaining, but they certainly, if there was an alert put out by CBP or ERO, enforcement and removal operations, to be on the alert for somebody, they would cooperate and they would pass that information on. And yes, people have been detained exiting the United States, whether at land ports of entry or at airports. So something to consider.
What about, and I don't know if you would have heard this because the CBP Home app is so new and there's not a lot of information about it, but one of the questions was for people who try to use it, will you be detained or will you go home on a commercial flight, return on a commercial flight, or will
Right.
it's flight?
I don't think we have a lot of anecdotal evidence, but certainly there's nothing that would prevent ICE from detaining somebody that's of interest. I mean, I think that's understood with all of these programs. They would reserve the right to detain somebody that's of interest to them according to their criteria. So you may think that you're a good candidate for home return with CBP Home, and you plug in your information, and ICE, for whatever reason, receives the information. Thank you very much, and they determine that, well, you're of interest to us because you have repeated immigration violations, or you have allegations of smuggling, and those allegations may or not be true. But yeah, I would assume that they would reserve the right to detain people, even those participating in this program, if they felt it was in the national interest or their interest.
Okay.
There's nothing preventing them from doing that.
Okay. Well, we've come to the end of our time for Q&A. Thank you so much to Alex. Thank you so much to Sarah for those wonderful presentations. There were a lot of questions we couldn't get to in the chat. We'll be following up with more resources. We'll also be sharing the recording. JRS USA is putting together some resources that we'll be sending out. But before we get to final announcements, our friends out in San Diego just joined us after their meeting with Bishop Pham, just in the nick of time. So, Father Hung and Father Scott, do you want to share with us for maybe just 3 or 4 minutes about y'all's experience a couple weeks ago at the immigration courtroom in San Diego?
Sure, we can share a few moments. Thank you all, and sorry we're late, but the idea to do this came from Dinora Reina Gutierrez from SDOP, which is a local affiliate of Pico, California, Faith in Action. And when it was going to be just clergy leaders that were going to be invited to go to the courts, we asked the bishop if we could put out an announcement to the clergy leaders to do it. When that thing somehow went viral, and then we had to pull it back and just do a mass for everybody and have a small group of people that went. When we went, it was probably, how many? It was probably 20, 25 clergy that went. And, we had agreed that it was just about presence, observing, helping migrants to know they're not alone, that we see them. And the feedback that we got from lawyers who were with us was, and the lawyers defending migrants, was that our presence made a difference. It made a difference in how the lawyers treated, how the judges treated the migrants, and it made a difference in terms of affecting ICE themselves. As Bishop Pham said, they kind of scattered when we arrived. So, and I also think it made a difference just us being there, like the media, picked up on it and went to town with it, and we've heard a lot of positive feedback since then. So I think it was a great day, and now the question is how to sustain it. And Bishop Pham wants to sustain it, and he's asked us to do that. So that's what we're looking at.
Well, that is
You want to
wonderful.
say something? Okay. I am sideways too. Yeah.
Well, I think Hung is driving, so
Yeah, he is.
for the sake of y'all's safety. Thanks for sharing that. We were very excited to see that. I'm sure y'all have heard the news. Made it all over, and also with our colleagues down in Latin America as well. They were very excited to see the just that action, that prayerful action there at the courtroom. And I think it can give us a model for how to express our faith in these public ways and show our solidarity in an effective way.
Yeah, you know what Bishop Pham just shared with us. The Bishop Pham of the Orange Diocese has set up a ministry to do this very thing. So they've already put something in place to keep it going, and we're kind of thinking, wow, it's great that this is kind of taking footholds elsewhere in other places.
That's wonderful. Okay, we got a couple announcements before we wrap up the call. Clara, do you want to share about what y'all have in the works?
Sure. Thank you, Harrison. I'm very excited to share a powerful opportunity that we are just starting at JRS USA. For the past 4 years, the JRS USA Jesuit Refugee Service Migrant Accompaniment Network has walked alongside recently arrived asylum seekers, refugees, and immigrants, supporting them integrate into communities across the United States. And now we are expanding our mission by stepping into the spaces where migrants are most vulnerable, as we just saw, ICE check-ins and immigration court hearings. So to offer what we call accompaniment at the core of our mission, of JRS's mission, what we see, it's a compassionate, watchful presence that affirms dignity and provides moral support. So if after our call today, you're still on board to make a difference, as Scott was saying, we will follow up with more information on how to register for this growing network of companions. The idea is that we can build a supportive community for peer learning and debriefing, regional teams to organize monthly calls to deepen the knowledge that we are getting after the work that you might be doing, and offer ongoing support from JRS USA and connections to local agencies. So again, I think Giovanna just put it on the chat. We will follow up with an email. We will share how to get involved, but also we will be sending all the presentations and the recording. The video will only be available under with the link. It won't be published in our YouTube channel. So just be thoughtful about who you're sharing all this information with. As someone said on the chat, I think it was Daniel, we need to be like discreet about the work that we are doing, not because we need to hide at all, but we just want the right eyes on it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Clara. One more announcement. Next week, we will be having another webinar specifically for parishes about developing a parish immigration response plan, as well as how to advocate to local officials. Being prepared if immigration enforcement arrives at your parish can be very helpful. And so one of our Jesuit ministries in Richmond, Virginia, the Sacred Heart Center, their executive director, Tanya Gonzalez, who worked years in city government and now has been years at this immigrant support center there in Richmond, is going to share about their parish support plan. And one of the parish priests will be joining as well. So that will be very helpful. The other thing she'll be sharing about, as someone who's worked in city government for many years, is about how do you advocate to local officials. We know that much of immigration enforcement will be carried out at the local level with sheriff's offices, et cetera, under agreements with federal law enforcement with ICE. And so working those relationships and advocating to your local officials can be very helpful as well. So she'll be sharing about those. We'll be sharing that information out in the listserv, as well as a follow-up email to this. And so if you're at a parish that will be particularly relevant to you next week, that will be on July 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And last of all, just thank you for being with us this evening. Thank you for walking alongside migrants in these uncertain times. We are reminded tonight that accompaniment is not an ideological strategy, but it is a posture of love. It is standing with, not speaking for. It is about being present and offering dignity in a world that often denies it. May what we've heard tonight strengthen our resolve, deepen our compassion, and equip us with the tools we need to accompany with courage. May it remind us that there is no us and them, there is only us. We are grateful to be on this journey with you. Have a good night.